Picture a man sitting on a plastic chair outside his house in the sugarcane belt of Tamil Nadu, holding a pencil he didn't particularly want to be holding. A researcher hands him a sheet of pattern puzzles, the kind you'd recognize from any IQ test. Shapes, sequences, odd one out. He works through them. He does okay. Not great, not terrible. Okay. A few months later, the researchers come back. Same man, same chair, same kind of test. This time he's sharper, faster, fewer mistakes. Nothing about him has changed. Same brain, same house, same sleep, same heat pressing down on everything. One thing is different. In between the tests, the harvest came in. He got paid for the year. The gap between broke him and paid him, measured by Anandimani, Senthil Mullainathan, Eldar Shafir, and Jiaying Zhao, published in Science in 2013, was 9 to 13 IQ points. That's roughly what you lose after a full night without sleep. And he was losing it and getting it back on a farming schedule. They checked the obvious explanations: nutrition, exhaustion, stress. He was more stressed before harvest, and stress still didn't account for the gap. Another team formally challenged the statistics. The authors reran it. It held. What was left was simpler and stranger. The mental load of not having money. The constant background calculation, how do I make it to Friday, isn't free. It takes up space. Whatever you were planning to think with, you're now thinking with less of it. So when someone in a leased Lamborghini tells you the only thing between you and wealth is discipline, hold that thought. The arrow here points both directions. And hold this one too, because I'm coming back to it. There is a group of Americans who pay a median of $380 a year in bank fees. The median amount of money in their account is under $350. They are being charged more per year for running out of money than they have ever had at one time. Nobody made a bad choice to end up there. It's a design, and by the end of this, you'll know exactly how it works. 6 habits. The first is famous and mostly wrong. 2 are invisible on purpose. 1 was legalized in your state in the last 5 years. And the last is the one nobody in this genre talks about, because there's no product attached to it. We start with a marshmallow, because the most famous experiment ever run on self-control turned out to be measuring something else entirely. You know the setup. A kid sits in a room with a treat. Eat it now, or wait 15 minutes and get 2. Then they film the kids squirming, which is genuinely great television. One of them just goes for it in under 3 seconds like a man with places to be. The ones who waited supposedly grew up more successful. That idea escaped the lab and colonized everything. The difference between rich and poor, we were told, is delayed gratification. In 2018, a team led by Tyler Watts reran it. 918 kids, about 10 times the original follow-up, far more economically varied. The effect shrank to half the reported size, then dropped another 2/3 once they controlled for family background and home environment. Most of what survived came down to whether the kid could wait at all. Not 15 minutes, 20 seconds. I'll be straight with you. This is contested. Critics argue home environment isn't separable from self-control. It's partly how. Self-control gets built, so subtracting it is like removing the flour and announcing there was never much cake. That fight's still going. But here's the crack that doesn't close. In 2013, researchers at Rochester ran the same test with a rigged prologue. Kids did an art project first. Half were promised better supplies, and got them. Half were promised the same thing, and the adult came back empty-handed. Then came the marshmallow. Kids who'd been told the truth waited about 12 minutes. Kids who'd been lied to waited about 3. Same kids. Same brains. different forecast. Waiting isn't just self-control. It's a bet that the future will actually deliver. A kid who grabs the marshmallow in an unreliable world isn't impulsive. He's correct. Habit 1. Reading your own inconsistency as a character flaw instead of as a signal. If you've ever followed a budget perfectly for 10 days and blown it in one night, the story you told yourself was about discipline. It usually isn't. Your system made a promise your life couldn't keep. You built a plan for a version of you with predictable time, no surprises, and infinite patience. That person doesn't exist. You keep budgeting for him. The fix isn't willpower. It's a system that survives you being tired, distracted, and slightly reckless, because that's who you'll be when it matters. Which brings us to a sentence from 1999 that I'd argue cost ordinary people more money than anything else in this industry. Not because it was a scam, because it pointed the wrong way. The sentence is basically, look at your daily coffee. The Latte Factor wasn't wrong. Small repeated expenses do compound. But when the idea left its original context, it became something else. You're poor because you like small pleasures. That did two things. It stretched the math, the examples turning $5 a day into a fortune, lean on assumptions that don't survive contact with reality. Journalist Helene Olin took a blowtorch to that arithmetic in Pound Foolish, and it aimed you at the wrong target. Bureau of Labor Statistics, most recent consumer expenditure survey. Average household spending, $78,535 a year. Housing, 33.4%. Transportation, 17.0%. Food, all of it. Groceries plus restaurants plus your coffee, 12.9%. 63% of everything in three categories. Coffee is a splinter inside a fraction of the smallest one. You're being told to optimize 1% while 99 goes unexamined. And you're told it in a moral register, which is the tell. That's not advice. That's a vibe check with a spreadsheet taped to it. I know because I did it. There was a year I tracked every coffee I bought. Every single one, in a notes app, like a lunatic. Cut them down to almost nothing. Saved about $1,100 and felt incredible about myself. That same year, I financed a car on a term I picked because it made the monthly number look friendly. The interest alone cost multiples of what I saved. I performed discipline where it was visible and ignored cost where it was complicated. Habit 2. Optimizing what's easy to measure instead of what's expensive to think about. But why does the small stuff feel urgent and the big stuff feel abstract? Because that reflex was built for you, not by economists, but by retailers who worked out the psychology decades before academics named it. In 2001, two MIT professors, Drazen Prelek and Duncan Symester, auctioned real Boston Celtics tickets. Half the bidders were told they'd pay cash, half by credit card. The credit card group bid roughly twice as much. Same tickets, same room, same game. The only difference was how the money would leave. The paper is called Always Leave Home Without It, which is a top 5 academic title, and it's the founding document for the pain of paying. Paying hurts. There's a small spike when money leaves your hand, and that spike isn't a bug. It's your price tag reader. It's what makes you go, in the half second before you commit. For 40 years, every payment innovation has been an anesthetic. Cards dulled it. Saved cards dulled it more. One click removed the checkout. Tap removed the PIN. Face ID removed the tap. Buy now, pay later removed the payment and replaced it with a rumor of a payment. All of it sold as convenience. All of it measured internally in incremental spend per user. The mechanism is called decoupling. separate payment from consumption in time, and they stop registering as the same event. A gym membership paid in January barely feels like it costs anything in March. That's not a metaphor. It's why annual billing exists. Then it gets weirder. Break $100 bill and it feels like destroying something. Spend the same 100 as 520s and it doesn't. That's the denomination effect, documented in 2009. And in 1769, a French philosopher was given a beautiful new dressing gown, decided his old chair looked shabby beside it, replaced the chair, then the desk, then the tapestry, went into debt redecorating his entire study, and wrote an essay about how he'd been happier as the absolute ruler of his old junk. It's now literally called the Diderot effect. One nice thing doesn't sit still. It renegotiates everything around it, which is also why raises vanish. I got one once, 20-something%, the kind you tell people about. 90 days later, my savings rate was identical. Not lower, identical. Absorbed into a slightly nicer version of the same life, and I couldn't point at a single purchase and say, that one. An economist named James Dusenberry called this in 1949. People don't set spending by income. They set it by what the people around them spend. And once a standard of living rises, it almost never comes back down. He got shelved for decades. He was right. And the people around you isn't your neighborhood anymore. It's a feed showing you the top 1% of everyone's life, which your brain quietly files under normal. Habit 3. Letting friction get engineered down to zero by companies whose revenue depends on exactly that. The counter habit is unpopular because there's no product in it. Put friction back, surgically. There's a 24-hour version at the end I think is worth the whole video. But friction explains the leaks, not the flood. For the flood, we go back to that $380. Terry Pratchett wrote the best economics in modern fiction as a joke about boots. The rich man buys boots that last 10 years. The poor man buys cheap boots every season. And after a decade, he's spent more and his feet are still wet. Being broke is expensive, not metaphorically, as a line item. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau found that about 9% of checking accounts generate roughly 79% of all overdraft and non-sufficient funds fees. Not 9% of the fees, 9% of the OR accounts. That's the group paying a median of $380 a year, with a median balance under $350. That's not a market. That's a subscription service where the product is your own poverty. The CFPB wrote a rule to cap it, projected to save households about $5 billion a year. Banks started voluntarily softening their programs under the pressure. Congress reversed the rule in 2025. The fees came back. Per National Consumer Law Center analysis of call report data, banks and credit unions pulled over $12 billion in overdraft and NSF fees in 2025. One bank that specifically serves military families raised its overdraft revenue 471%. I'm not telling you that to make you angry at one institution. I'm telling you so you update one belief. This is not a fair fight. Nobody is coming, and the rules can be written and unwritten inside 18 months without you getting an email. Then there's the car. Edmunds data, second quarter of 2026. 29.6% of trade-ins toward new vehicles were underwater. Nearly 3 in 10 people walked into a dealership already owing more than the car was worth. Average amount underwater, $6,884. That debt doesn't get paid. It gets rolled into the next loan on top of the next car. You're financing a vehicle plus the ghost of the previous vehicle. Those buyers averaged $944 a month against an industry average of $777. Projected interest over the life of the loan, $16,000 of interest on a depreciating box. The mechanism is loan length. A huge share get financed over 84 months, 7 years. And here's why it works. Dealerships negotiate in monthly payment, not total cost. Stretch the term, the monthly drops, you feel like you won. You didn't. The car depreciates faster than the loan amortizes, so you stay underwater. And the only exit is a bigger hole. That was my car, the one I ignored while I audited my coffee. I negotiated ferociously on the monthly and lost catastrophically on the total, and felt clever the whole time. Habit 4. Treating interest rates and fees as background noise instead of as the main target. If you're paying the broke tax, that's the entire game, not the budget. Stop the bleed first. Now the new one. A habit that barely existed 5 years ago and gets advertised during the games your kids watch. In 2019, Americans wagered about $1.1 billion a month on legal sports betting. By January 2024, roughly $14 billion. A month. That's not growth. That's a phase change. One Supreme Court decision, plus the betting window moving from a building in Nevada to the device 3 feet from you. A team led by Scott Baker at Northwestern's Kellogg School examined transaction data from more than 230,000 households across states that legalized. The paper is called Gambling Away Stability, which tells you where it goes. And the central finding is brutal in the quiet way academic findings are brutal. The money didn't come out of other entertainment. It came out of savings and investment. In households that placed bets, net investments dropped about 14%. The damage concentrated exactly where you'd fear. Constrained households saw credit card debt rise and overdraft frequency increase, feeding straight back into the machine we just discussed. It's plumbing connected to the same drain. Now let me do something most channels won't. Early working papers reported that online sports betting raised bankruptcy risk 25 to 30%. That number went viral. You've seen it. As the research went through review, the estimates came down, closer to a 10% increase in bankruptcy likelihood in online betting states, plus about 8% more debt sent to collections appearing roughly 2 years after legalization. Still bad. 10% more bankruptcies is a lot of ruined years. But it isn't 30. And if I quoted 30 because it makes a better thumbnail, I'd be doing the exact thing this channel exists as an alternative to. Here's the number that explains the business model. In New Jersey, about 5% of gamblers place roughly 70% of the bets. The industry doesn't run on someone throwing $20 on a Sunday. It runs on a small group in serious trouble. And every feature, the notifications, the same game parlays, the free bet back promos, the in-play betting that turns one game into 200 decisions, exists to find them and keep them. Underneath it is something people have started calling financial nihilism. If you're 26, the median home costs a multiple of income no previous generation faced, and a diligent 8% return gets you a house at 51, then a parlay paying 400 to 1 isn't irrational. It's the only strategy that closes the gap. I had my own version. Mine was options, short-dated, on companies I hadn't researched, sized in a way I'd describe as spiritually significant. I told myself I was investing. I was buying volatility, because volatility was the only thing moving fast enough to matter. And the account was down 60% before I could build a story about why it was fine. Obscure fact: the modern American state lottery starts in New Hampshire in 1964, structured as a sweepstakes tied to horse races specifically to root around federal anti-lottery law. The founding act of the sector was a legal workaround wearing a hat. Habit 5. Confusing variance with return. Treating the possibility of a large outcome as if it were the expectation of one. The tell is time horizon. If you can't hold it 5 years without checking, it isn't an investment. It's a bet with better branding. Which leaves the last one. And I have to start by disqualifying myself. In 2014, Daniel Fernandez, John Lynch, and Richard Nedemeyer published a meta-analysis in Management Science. 168 papers, 201 studies, asking whether teaching people about money changes what they do with money. Financial literacy interventions explained about 0.1% of the variance in financial behavior, 0.1%. And the effects decay within about 20 months. So this video, if it behaves like videos behave, will do almost nothing for you. Unless. Because the finding has a shape, and the shape is the instruction manual. Education fails when it's general and early. It works when it's specific and adjacent to the decision. You learn about mortgage points the week you're choosing mortgage points. Don't try to become a person who knows about money. Become a person who looks things up in the 90 minutes before signing something. And that points straight at habit 6. Putting all your attention on spending and almost none on income. Spending has a floor. You can't cut below 0, and realistically nowhere near it, because 63% of your outflow is housing, transport, and food. Income has no ceiling. But income is harder. It requires negotiation, timing, asking uncomfortable questions out loud. So most advice ignores it, because cutting is universal and legible and produces infinite content. Most people never negotiate a starting offer. In the Carnegie Mellon study behind Linda Babcock's Women Don't Ask, graduates who negotiated raised their starting salaries by an average of 7.4%, about $4,000, which almost exactly matched the gap between men's and women's starting pay in that cohort. And a starting salary isn't a one-time number. It's the base every future raise compounds off, and the anchor that follows you the moment somebody asks what you currently make. A few thousand conceded at 24 isn't a few thousand. It's a permanently lower slope on a 40-year line. So what actually works? Not motivation, not discipline, design. Everything that reliably works removes the need for you to be good at this. Start with defaults, which are free and stronger than you are. When retirement plans require opting in, participation sits around half. When they auto-enroll and require opting out, it runs into the high 80s. Same people, same plan, same money. Only the direction of inertia changed. You cannot out-discipline a default. So set yours on purpose. Transfers on payday. Escalation on raises. Contributions that land before the money touches checking. Thaler and Benartzi ran this at a factory in 1998 and watched savings rates go from 3.5% to 13.6%. Not through education, just by moving the decision away from the moment of pain. Second, friction. Delete your saved cards, all of them, from anywhere that isn't a daily necessity. Not because you'll spend less on any single purchase, but because you've reinstalled the half-second where a purchase becomes a decision. Then, the 24-hour rule. Anything discretionary above a threshold you pick goes in the cart, and you close the tab. Come back tomorrow. You're not banning it. You're refusing to let it be bought by the version of you that exists at 11:40 p.m., who has objectively worse judgment, and who is exactly who the entire e-commerce industry is built to talk to. Third, tie rules to moments. When X happens, I do Y. When the paycheck lands on the 15th, I move $400 before opening any other app. Specify the trigger, not just the goal, and your brain stops deciding and starts executing. Fourth, fix the price of your money before the amount. A card at 24%, a car loan you got talked into, an account eating overdrafts. That's the project. Every dollar out of a punitive rate is a guaranteed, tax-free, risk-free return no investment can promise. Call the bank. Ask for the fee-free account most large banks have and don't advertise. That awkward 20-minute call beats watching 9 more videos like this one. Fifth, track one number: net worth monthly or savings rate monthly. 5 minutes. A crude system you run beats an elegant one you abandon in March. And last, choose your reference group on purpose. For the first time in history, you get to pick your peers, because most of them reach you through a feed you control. If your timeline is full of consumption you can't match, you're not being inspired, you're being taxed. Because the version of you making financial decisions won't be calm and rational. He'll be tired, busy, distracted, exactly like the farmer before the harvest. That's the point. If scarcity eats bandwidth, the answer was never to become better under pressure. It's to build systems that don't require any. The industry sells virtue because virtue can be sold again. You can always be told to want less. You'll always eventually fail. And there's always another course. Systems only have to be built once. The habits keeping you poor were rarely just habits. They were designs. So change the design. Even a bad architect beats a great tenant.